right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I don't see anybody else waiting. This series has been a pleasure because you all have been on the journey, and thank you for your participation. It's a comfort to me to be in community with you. Thank you. Examination of the Christian's role in democracy. This series was designed to help us individually and corporately in community to determine, do we and how do we engage today in the governance of our city, county, state, and country. By design, information has been presented like core values, key principles, theological basis, kind of the higher level information was presented, and that was given to you so you could reflect on that higher level thinking and digest that and use that to kind of settle yourself or focus, versus this forum being a declarative statements about this is this and this is that, and instructing you in how and what you should think. The goal here was to provide substantive, meaningful information that you could use to refine your thoughts and in some regards, for me, kind of settle myself down. We began this series by reminding ourselves of the key concepts that are foundational to American democracy. And then the next session, the context and the origin of those concepts. We discussed governance and theological basis of the Episcopal Church. And then most recently, last week, we shifted our focus from corporate organization and governance to principles that inform our individual personal behavior, specifically Christian attributes outlined in the Holy Scripture and by our church leaders. And again, the goal is by steeping ourselves in these basics and these fundamentals, we're able to refocus our view and then increase clarity about what we think is truly important. And in doing so, equip ourselves to best engage in today's rather contentious political environment as we choose. So I hope we met some of that. I'm going to share my screen now. I'm going to go to the next slide. So and again, just a few minutes of summary and wrap up, and then we're going to talk. We're going to talk about what we think is important and what we think we can do. In this forum, we reminded ourselves that democracy is a form of government that gives power to the people. But there's a lot of leeway in terms of how that's implemented. How is power allocated? When is power allocated? And to whom is power allocated? And this very broad definition of democracy encompasses some pretty diverse forms of democracy. So when you see the word democracy, it just doesn't automatically mean our American democracy. We recall in the first week, we talked about some of these outliers. The first one is democratic centralism that was made famous by Vladimir Lenin. He was the leader of the 1917 Russian Revolution. He established a communist government that allowed no private property to exist. All members of society were theoretically equal. However, Lenin considered a small vanguard of the revolution, quote unquote, necessary to guide the people and establish order. So a small group of leaders make decisions in the name of the people based on their perceptions of what the people want and need. And democratic centralism includes a practice in which political decisions reached by voting processes are binding upon all members of a political party. So they vote as a bloc. So that's democratic centralism. And then there's authoritarian democracy, a form of democracy directed by a ruling elite of an authoritarian state that seeks to represent the different interests of society, also referred to as totalitarian democracy. The concept of authoritarian democracy is based on the maxim, confidence from below, authority from above, wherein an enlightened authority is responsive to the needs and clamor of the people. Authoritarian democracy rejects our conventional democratic concepts that all citizens are equal and that majority rules. So this key question is pretty darn key. And I dare say it's something to focus on. And then when we have our American democracy, and our American democracy originated as a response to challenging circumstances with promise of great opportunity. Gee, that kind of sounds like where we are today. Challenging circumstances with promise of great opportunity. How do we engage? We talked about our Episcopal Church's governance structure, that it was designed to give voice and decision-making powers to bishops and laity. Excuse me 1 minute here. Yeah. And then we talked about Christian attributes. Reminding ourselves again about these core values and key elements and guiding principles of our American democracy. This is something that I find helpful to recall. Bear with me, I'm looking for some notes here. The core values of our American democracy: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, justice, common good. Life, each citizen has the right to the protection of his or her life. Each citizen has the right to the protection of his or her life. Liberty. Liberty includes the freedom to believe what we want, freedom to choose, and freedom to have our own ideas and opinions. Liberty. Pursuit of happiness. Each citizen can find happiness in his or her own way, as long as they don't step on the rights of other people. Justice. All people should be treated fairly. Nobody gets specific advantages or disadvantages. Common good. Citizens should work together for the good of all. The government should make laws that are good for everyone. Equality. Everyone should get the same treatment regardless of what their status is, where they were born, what their race is, and what their religion is, or how much money they have. Citizens should have political, social, and economic equality. Wow. Truth. The government and its citizens should not lie. Diversity. Differences in language, dress, food, origin, religion are accepted. Patriotism, devotion to our country, and core democratic values. The key elements of our American democracy: a political system for choosing and replacing the government through free and fair elections. The active participation of all the people in politics and governance. Protection of the human rights of all citizens, and a rule of law in which laws and procedures apply equally to everyone. In our Constitution, we've got these guiding principles that are cited here. We've got popular sovereignty. The people give the government its power. We the people is in the introduction to the Constitution. The Constitution clearly spells out that the people are the government source of power. I'm going to jump around a little bit. Republicanism. The framers of the Constitution wanted the people to have a voice in government, but the framers also feared that public opinion might stand in the way of sound decision making. Does that sound familiar? To solve this problem, they looked to republicanism as a model of government. The people exercise their power by voting for their political representatives. It's a Republican form of government. Federalism. This is how power is shared The framers of the Constitution wanted the states in the nation to become partners in governing. Because recall from week 2, we talked about how it was just basically 13 colonies, and they really, in the middle of the 18th century, during the Revolution and after the Revolution, had to create the federal system, had to create this entity of national jurisdiction. Federalism is a system of government in which power is divided between a central government and smaller political units such as the states. The powers of the federal government and the states are clearly defined, and each has exclusive power over their own spheres with little overlap. Separation of powers. The framers of the Constitution were concerned too much power might fall into the hands of a single group. To avoid this problem, they built separation of powers. In Article 1, created the legislative branch, 2, the executive branch, and 3, the judicial branch. Checks and balances. Each branch of government can check or control some aspect of the other branches, and though the branches of government are separate, they rely on one another to perform the work of the government. The framers included a system of checks and balances in the Constitution to help make sure that the branches work together fairly. Only Congress can pass laws, yet the president can check this power by refusing to sign a law into action. In turn, the Supreme Court can declare that a law violates the Constitution. Limited government. I'm sorry, let me go to one other place here to get a better definition of limited government. This one is not very good.
I love the Michael Curry quotes.
Those are from September and October, and they're from an interview he had about his new book and from an interview with an organization called Democracy Now! Okay, limited government. Federalism limits government by creating this 2 sovereign powers, national government, state government. I don't have a good definition for limited government. I'm sorry, that's one thing that I didn't do, but does anybody want to speak up about what limited government is in the Constitution? I've seen it described 3 different ways, and I'm just really not satisfied with what I have, and I'm sorry I'm not very prepared to answer that right now. We have federalism, and then limited government. I think we want to preserve individuals' rights. We want to avoid a tyrannical power entity in the government, kind of like King George was in the 1700s. So in some respect, that's limited government. I'm sorry, it's kind of falling on my face on that one. But there's a quote here from Thomas Jefferson: "A government big enough to give you everything you want is strong enough to take everything you have." Moving on to the Christian attributes, probably the best summary of what we talked about last week is this great commandment. "Hear, O Israel, our God, the Lord is one. Thou shalt love thy Lord, thy God, with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." So then what is love? Looking at recent quotes from our presiding bishop, without love, we won't make it. With love, we will. I'm not talking about love as a sentiment. I'm talking about love as a personal and moral commitment to a particular way of living, a way of living that is unselfish, even sacrificial, a way of living that seeks the good and the welfare and the well-being of others, as well as the self. The love I'm talking about is a love that is for the other, as well as the self, that is for God and for all of us. It is a love that seeks to create and make a better world, a more humane world, a more just world. Without that commitment to love, then all the practical details won't work. But with that commitment, we can find a way to solve our problems together, to bring everybody together, bipartisan, across the aisle, ecumenical, interfaith, all races, all stripes and types, because we share one moral commitment to seek the good of others as well as ourselves. And now is the time for us, all of us, to show in our words, our actions, and our lives what love really looks like. With that, I am putting these two questions out there for us to discuss. What is important? What is important to you, each of you individually? What is important to us collectively? And in keeping with that concept of when you're in an environment where you can't do this and you can't do that and you can't do the other, you reframe in your mind and you ask the question, well, what can I do? And that helps you become more aware of actions you can take to address whatever's at hand. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see all of you again, because I lost that. But I do have one more slide, and it is a reference to a book called Crucial Conversations. And let me just go to that right now, and then I'll stop sharing my screen altogether. Carol, you asked at the end of last week about resources to help facilitate having some potentially difficult conversations. And in thinking about that, I remembered this book, and I got this summary online today. I read it probably 12 years ago, and it's a great resource. It talks about factors that define a crucial conversation. Opinions differ, stakes are high, emotions are charged, and it talks about 3 camps of behavior: people who get emotionally drawn in and resort to threats and name calling during crucial conversations, people who silently fume, that's me, and then those who speak openly, honestly, and effectively. And if handled properly, conversations can create breakthroughs. If handled badly, they can lead to breakdowns. And in this book, they have 7 steps about how to facilitate crucial conversations. Starting in the heart and staying in empathy and positive intent, or starting with empathy and positive intent, staying in dialogue, even when it kind of gets rough, just being able to continue to talk with each other in as long as it hasn't escalated to something bad. Making the conversation, making it safe to have that conversation. That there's not judgment, there's not anger. Avoiding getting hooked by emotion or avoiding trying to hook other people, agreeing to a mutual purpose, separating facts from story, facts from fiction, and then finally agreeing on a clear action plan. So I just put that out there for you. So with that, let's talk about, I want to hear from you what you think is important in what we can do. And so with that, I open the floor to you guys.
Are we still muted? No, I'm talking. They can hear me. I was muted before.
Yeah, I can hear you and see you.
Okay, we're a mess. Democracy's a mess in this country. Someone wants to steal our election. How am I supposed to love somebody that marches and chants, "The Jews will not replace us"? Help me, Christ. So there's my 2 cents for now.
No, I mean, I see your pain and I feel it. And but we got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that's
Go
really
back to a time where we were all Americans and we all wanted basically the same things in our life, the core values and everything. And I know that there's been, you know, times when the country's fallen short, but that togetherness, that we're all Americans, like how we felt after 9/11, I would like to see that back in our hearts. And unfortunately, in this climate, because of the COVID and not voting the way we normally vote, and we have a clear winner, this has made for a very difficult climate. And I don't know what else to say about that. You know,
I want to throw out a radical proposition here. The best thing we can do, I think, and I speak in all frankness, is not give in to the currents of hate that are permeating this country. And I think, I mean, I think of how St. Francis referred, or excuse me, Pope Francis, forgive me for the mistake, referred to the Christian church as a field hospital at the edge of the battlefield. I think that a battlefield is in all our hearts. And if we give in to joining the fight in a way which is committed to the destruction of other people, we will do nobody any good. And I speak for that personally, and I speak for that as a Christian. The question is how to do that. I think the president-elect was very eloquent on Saturday night when he said, look, we don't want to demonize anybody. I think that's important. And I think the single best thing we can do as Christians is not give in to the dark forces that are frankly seeking to destroy democracy and to destroy the country. Those forces are evident in a number of powerful people. I'm not going to name names, but I suspect the people on this call know who I'm talking about. But those forces are at work in every one of us too. And it's our duty as Christians not to give in to them.
well, because of the fact that we don't get, you know, journalism has become not journalism. They don't just give you a fact and then you make up your mind. They are making up our mind for us. And because there's just so much info out there and you really don't know what's true and what's not true, I find that very difficult. Because, you know, it depends on what news you're listening to or what, you know, your own personal feelings are. It gets colored by all this journalism that may or may not be true. And how do we know? How do you do that?
I know a couple of journalists who
are some of the most honest, honorable people I know. And
with integrity
and frankly,
I don't know any. I don't know any.
And frankly, they work at what are called legacy publications that large fractions of this country have chosen to distrust. And these are people who are committed to honest reporting. There is opinion in the news. I would agree with that. I think it is difficult not to have opinions about that. But by and large,
it shouldn't be that way. It should not have opinions. It should just be reporting of the fact, not their opinion. I don't want their opinion.
and
I want to form my own opinion.
Most of it is fact, but there are.
No, it's not. I disagree with that.
Okay, well, I disagree with you, Peggy.
That's fine. That's good.
Well, I think that I really appreciate your statement, David, about not giving in to the dark forces, because there's so much divisiveness and you know, in my personal perspective is that divisiveness is very intentionally being fed and inflamed, and that there's a tactic. Used to be you could turn on the news in the 60s and have the 3 major channels, and you had a lot of confidence in what you were hearing, and it was reassuring. But I think also there's tactics out there that have created this distrust of news and different political spins of news. And I think that the partisanization is another artificial construct that's being used to damage our democracy.
It's become more important than the partisanship has become more important than the
And
actual
solving
work.
problems, actually taking care of our country and ourselves. Yeah,
Right.
it's like the cart before the horse, and I
Right.
think that there are people that profit from having that control in that position and just really are pushing it. I
Mhm.
think there's also people that want to see the demise of our democracy and want to see us struggle that are at work. But that's my personal.
In the 50s, Khrushchev, if you all remember, said that America would not be destroyed from outside, we would destroy ourselves.
Well,
It would
yeah,
be destroyed from inside. And I fear that's what I'm seeing. It used to be we had an election, no matter which side you were on, we came together as country and supported our president.
there
And that
were
is
norms, there were
not going
behavior
away.
norms that you acknowledge the outcome of the road of the
That's not happening
election.
anymore.
No, that's not happening anymore. And I think
2016.
that's by design as well.
That didn't just happen in 2020, it happened in 2016. We had an election, we had someone elected, and then it was just total hatred and not coming together like I'm used to. And
Well, I mean, we can even take it back into partisan politics during the Obama administration and the way that the Republicans would stonewall anything that Obama tried to do. I mean, it's just really gotten out of control. And what it's done is it's feeding itself, and it's become the focus rather than the governance of our country and taking care of our business.
President Obama twice, and I was very aware of how he was treated because he was my president. But then when Trump was elected, I did not see him getting the same. I mean, there was more of that divisiveness than I've ever seen any president go through. And
I think he likes to create that divisiveness.
what?
I think he likes to create that divisiveness.
I don't. I think he did a really good job, and I was really pleased with the job he did. But, I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I vote for the one that I think is going to do the best job. And, as far as I could tell, he did a good job and he loves America. And that's not real popular anymore to love your country.
Is that enough? I mean, is that where it begins and ends, is with patriotism?
No, of course not.
Bigger place than that.
But it's got to be all encompassing, and it can't be just one thing. It's got to be all encompassing. You can't say, well, you have to do, that was wrong what was done to President Obama. And it was wrong. But it was also wrong what was done to President Trump also. He did not get the let's come together thing that we normally expect after an election. And that part was wrong. And we should have just waited until the next election, but that wasn't what happened.
Thank you for sharing that. What is important? What I hear respect for the office of the president is being important.
I think it starts with respect for each other before that too. And I'm not sure there's a lot of that going around. I sort of read a few things this afternoon, and one was by a Catholic site, which literally has done this entire course that you just did. It just followed right along the same things that we've
Tell
talked
me that
about.
link, if you would.
I now have to look for where I found it. I don't even remember the name of it. And the other thing that I read was from Education for Ministry, and they had a woman priest who was in disagreement with her father on different sides of the political aisle, and she found it very difficult to talk to him, but she made a point to do it, and it outlines their conversation and how they came together to be able to discuss this and really found out a lot about each other that they didn't know because they hadn't been talking to each other. And so I think that's sort of a conversation that goes on a lot of times is you have to find a common ground. And I think that was where they finally arrived. It took a little bit, but they got there. And it was just a really good outline of how to have a conversation with somebody. And the fact that they were both determined to do it was part of it too. They didn't just, as in previous times she stated, get mad and stomp off. They stuck with it and they talked to each other. So I think that there's a lot of stuff out there that talks about where we are, and there seem to be a whole lot of other people with the same types of thoughts of these trying to figure it out too. And I think that, everybody's talking about the same thing. It's how to get along.
Yeah, but I think we're still huddled in our corners.
Yeah.
We have to mix and mingle and be willing to take that time like that priest and her father did, so we can understand where each of us is coming from.
Right.
And that's difficult. And it takes time.
It does. It takes a desire to be in the conversation too. I mean, some people don't care, they just want you to listen to them.
Yeah.
And hear their side.
Carol, it's fear. It's the fear, if you're on the side that is maybe an unpopular side, for a lot of people that you're in community with, and there's a fear there of speaking your conscience,
Well, I think that's what keeps people, quiet. And
oh yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the points from the crucial conversations, the sense of fear. And I learned from that one of the things that I have always experienced that I call jelly brain is, how can a articulate, fairly intelligent person suddenly be incapable of saying anything? And they said it's actually caused by the adrenaline that you feel because you have a fear that you're going to be ridiculed or shouted at or disbelieved. And that was interesting. I don't know if any of you had time to, the Crucial Conversations book is sort of fundamental to anybody who ever takes a conflict resolution class. It's a well-known text. And it's been, as Courtney said, it's been around for a while. And I happened to go out on Amazon today and discover that they must have kind of woken up to the relevance for right now and quickly put out this very short summary and kind of updated it a little. And if you go on Amazon, if you're a Kindle person and you have Kindle Unlimited, it's free, but if you're not, it's like about $3. And it's an excellent summary of the Crucial Conversations book and the process and the solutions. And I found it to be helpful today. And you can read it in about 20 minutes.
So and I think this was the screen that Courtney put up that had quite a bit of information on it, but I was struck by this idea of the various approaches to this conversation, being from fuming to, there were three different levels, and it was the assumption that each of us sort of achieves one of those levels in all topics. And I think that that was what I was struck by, that depending upon the topic, I can see myself in any one of those particular characteristics of participation. And I think that, the current political topic is one that is, you know, that spans that spectrum for probably all of us. I've struggled with this topic for, you know, seriously for the last 4 years, but it's, you know, I really think the sort of downturn in our political compatibility within the country probably started most recently, and I think it's cycled through the ages, but most recently in the early 90s with probably the 1994 midterm election in Newt Gingrich
Yeah.
sort of started that real contentious kind of interaction that's just escalated since then. And so we're not seeing something brand new. We're seeing just the continuing escalation. One of the sort of opinion people that I've found very helpful particularly in the last couple of years, David Brooks, who many of you know probably is at one time the conservative commentator for Wall Street Journal and New York Times, PBS as well, who has sort of turned into very sort of inward, thoughtful approach to the topic of our discord in politics in the last couple of years. And he had a piece just a few days ago in the New York Times where he advocated that one of the needed solutions is to seriously return to and embrace the separation of church and state. And it's easy for me to understand why that was such a core principle within our foundation in this country. The acceptance of church in the 13 colonies was far from universal.
Yeah.
Basically the northern colonies despised the Catholic Church. The southern colonies despised the evangelicals and or their predecessors perhaps. So, you know, I think one of the things we might consider is how do we sort of return to remove the church from this culture war that's sort of raging within the political system right now. I don't know, perhaps too many comments, but just.
No, thank you. Thank you for speaking up. I'm trying to understand, and I don't fully understand when you say remove the church from the altercation. I don't understand really what you're saying or what the action is there. I know you're not asking us to abandon our faith to make an extreme, but to make more of a separation between church and state. I don't quite understand.
Okay, so I realize that's not clear, but you know, another opinion columnist that I follow and actually have had a personal relationship is Thomas Friedman, who reports for or writes for the New York Times, and he I think it might have been just Wednesday, just today, he recounted a breakfast table conversation with his wife from a couple of days past, where she said, where his wife Ann said, isn't lying one of the 10 commandments? And Thomas Friedman said he had to think a second, and he said, oh yeah, do not bear false witness. He said, the problem is I had to think a couple of minutes because
Yeah.
because untruthfulness has become so endemic in our culture. The idea of alternative realities, and you may think this truth, but and the church has always been all about the truth, right?
Yes.
So if you're going to accept that there are two different viewpoints in our particular political situation, yet one truth, how do you reconcile those two ideas? And one of the ways you do that is, all right, the Christian truth is different. And I know we've all heard, how can this person reconcile their support of this individual when they seem to be so amoral?
That can be said on both sides. I mean, there's been a lot said just on that particular topic, both sides. It just depends on what side you're on, where you can't see both sides. You can only see your side.
Yeah, and that's, it is, and there's part of that is this divisiveness, and I just, my heart aches. I mean, I'm just absolutely sick by what's happening to our country right now. It hurts.
It does.
Does, I agree. I went back to Christian principles is what I went back to this afternoon when I was looking at this. And the first thing I came up with was the commandment. I mean, that the great commandment, that was the first thing. And we have to have respect for everybody's right to think, what they're thinking. And we still need to seek the truth. And I don't know, I've learned to depend on verify on TV. When they've been some question, they've had a verify, and they'll tell you the facts exactly. And that's about the only one that I realize that is factual anymore. And actually morality, to me, has got to be at the top of it. And I think it's inseparable from religion. So I don't know how you would separate church and state in that respect. And then finding a common ground. I just think that's probably what you have to do. Is the common ground is maybe the good of the country, or
Country, yeah.
what you would like to see for the country. I'm kind of like you. I feel like after 9/11, we all came together as one, and I don't see that right now. I don't see a desire to do it either. That's the sad part.
Well, there's a lot of talk about listening and understanding each party, and I think there's a lot to that, and it's very difficult, and I think it's very complex. It's not just, we ought to be together. There really is there's some very deep-seated feelings that are being, that they're playing out in this division. And it's not simple. I just can't conclude that it's as simple as, well, we just all ought to get along.
Yeah.
But it has to start with talking and listening.
Right.
And
realizing that, you know, the other person has got the right to say and think what they do, just like you do. Even, and they're as committed to their way as you are to yours. So
Yeah, one of our key principles is working for the common good, but what is in the best, what is the common good?
well, to get rid of the hatred and vitriol would be a step toward,
It'd clean things up, wouldn't it?
yeah.
Our
Make it all-
history, the history of our country is not founded on us doing for the common good, which you can look at our Black community. Nothing was done for their good. And to say, well, the reason was, I mean, they were literally using the Bible to push forth this notion of slavery. And we all know how just insidious that is and everything. But our history, so now we have all these people that had been pushed to the side that are gaining their footing in our country. And it's not as clear as it, like the common good. Well, there's a lot of people that don't feel like they've been part of the common good. And I understand that.
well, and I think that's true, Peggy, through our history as a country. I mean, our common good has not been, I mean, it hasn't been geographically the common good. It wasn't geographically the common good in the 13 colonies, and that played out later in the Civil War.
Sure, they were not, Black people were not the common man. I mean, they were excluded. They were looked on as chattel or not human or animals to, approve that point of view. And we all know from experience how wrong that was.
And Courtney, in your list of topics or sort of founding principles or fundamental principles, federalism, we're seeing that play out. I mean, and it's come home for me, the statement that you might often hear: we're not a democracy, we're a federation. And in fact, that's playing for us pretty heavily right now. We have 50 states who all have their say, and the fact that one candidate voted upon by all of those 50 states has 4 million votes other than above the other is not a deciding factor. In fact, it's not a factor at all. It's irrelevant, and that's the consequence of the foundations of our form of democracy, call it.
Yeah, it's incredibly complex, and part of me, in addition to the notion of federalism, you've got this ultra partisanship, and you've got the Republicans acting in a block. I mean, I heard today that Governor Bill Lee said that he wasn't, my words, he wasn't convinced that Joe Biden was the president-elect. So you've got the partisanship playing out at the state level. It's just such.
They haven't all been counted yet, Courtney. I mean, they're doing a recount because things didn't seem on the up and up. So, I mean, it's not a foregone conclusion. But,
Yeah, but
when it does happen, and if it is Joe Biden, that doesn't mean that I am not going to love you, love this country, and hope for the best for all of us, you know. But I don't think it's a decided issue at this point because of the way we had to vote. You know,
Well-
we didn't have the
And
next day we knew who the president was.
you can also hear information that talks about the basis of some of the lawsuits that are being raised about the Republicans not having access to X table in the center of the vote counting or the ballot counting to confirm signatures. Well, in reality, in that area, the signature confirmation was done before the ballots even got there somewhere else. So I mean, just this, it's just rather chaotic right now.
It is chaotic and there's noise. It really is just noise because, Donald Trump was declared the winner of many states on a much thinner margin than is being disputed now. I mean, it really is noise. I think we all.
It went the other way with Biden. The same thing happened with Biden.
And the
Same
polls
thing.
today say, that it's pretty well settled. But it's.
Not in my mind. It's not settled yet.
I realize that.
Until everything's counted, it's not settled.
No, and I realize that that's a viewpoint that's held, but.
Yeah, it's really hard right now. Tough sledding. What can we do? What,
Well,
David,
we can resolve to not let that affect our relationship with.
Right,
the church,
exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the first comment that was made is to not let the hate take over.
I was getting ready to say, I so appreciate David's comment. Just
That was really good.
Yeah. It's easy to let that happen.
I hate labels. I'm a registered Democrat, but I don't agree with everything. I'm pro-life, not pro-choice. And I try to see the point of view of, and that was just as an example. I don't like to see a lot of money spent on that's going to cause our national debt to go up higher and higher and higher. I'm very conservative in fiscal matters. I'm for the environment and going green, but coming from southeastern Kentucky, there are hundreds of thousands of people who are really tied to coal mining. And while, what's the common good? Well, is the common good to reduce greenhouse gases? Well, maybe so, except in West Virginia, parts of Pennsylvania, Eastern Kentucky, and perhaps parts of Tennessee. I think going forward, because, this series of lectures, which I've really enjoyed, Courtney, I have to look at candidates not based on are they talking the party line, but do they seem reasonable people who will sit down and listen and compromise to solve some of these problems that we've had for so long. I just, I will continue to vote for a Democrat and for a Republican, depending on how I feel that they are willing to listen and compromise and do what they think is in the best interest of our country. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I think we're in for a long, tough period. It's not going to go away soon. It's going to be hard for a long time, unfortunately. And I know I'm going to pray about it. Keep praying about it. but we can't let the hatred infect our hearts. And Bishop Curry talks about love. And so I'm not going to let hatred infect my heart, and I'm going to love more and pray for insight on what to do. I mean, I have personal opinions on what's happening, and I need to seek quality information to really understand what's going on and not make assumptions. I'm going to do that, continue to do that. It's so easy to find information out there that supports one way or the other. But it's hard. It's hard. So how about, does anybody else have anything they want to add?
Today's Veterans Day,
Today is Veterans Day.
and
Yeah.
an awful lot of veterans fought for and stood for our form of government, which included free speech. You mentioned Lenin earlier. In at least in part of the USSR's period of time, had we been having this conversation and it was observed, then, you know, we might have someone knocking on our door wanting to know what we're talking about and being taken off to the gulag. So thank God we've had veterans throughout the history of our country who have stood up and fought and stood for many things, including the right for free speech that we've had here tonight. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Fine.
Yeah.
Well, there's a good article in this month's Atlantic about how we are two Americas. And we are.
Maybe we can, God will show us the way. I'm going to look to the Book of Common Prayer and read for us the prayer for sound government, followed by the prayer for those in the armed forces of this country. And I'm going to extend that to those who also have previously served in the armed forces of our country. So, O Lord, our governor, bless the leaders of our land, that we may be a people at peace among ourselves and a blessing to other nations of the earth. Lord, keep this nation under your care. To the president and members of the cabinet, to governors of states, mayors of cities, and to all in administrative authority, grant wisdom and grace in the exercise of their duties. Give grace to your servants, O Lord. To senators and representatives and those who make our laws in states and cities and towns, give courage, wisdom, and foresight to provide for the needs of all our people and to fulfill our obligations in the community of nations. Give grace to your servants, O Lord. To the judges and officers of our courts, give understanding and integrity, that human rights may be safeguarded and justice served. Give grace to your servants, O Lord. And finally, teach our people to rely on your strength and to accept their responsibilities to their fellow citizens, that they may elect trustworthy leaders and make wise decisions for the well-being of our society, that we may serve you faithfully in our generation and honor your holy name. For yours is the kingdom, O Lord, and you are exalted as head above all. Amen. For those in the armed forces of our country and who have previously served in the armed forces of our country, Almighty God, we commend to your gracious care and keeping all the men and women of our armed forces now and before, those that are at home and abroad. Defend them day by day with your heavenly grace. Strengthen them in their trials and temptations. Give them courage to face the perils which beset them, and grant them a sense of your abiding presence wherever they may be. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Well, Courtney, thank you. This has been a really interesting series and certainly worth revisiting all of our heritage.
Thank you, and it's been a privilege to be in this journey with you all. So, and we
Thank you.
got a long way to go.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank for all of you for your insights.
Yes, I appreciate everybody's comments.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Courtney.
All right. Love you all.
Love
Love
y'all.
you
Be
too.
around. Call me.